First leg of Julian Assange's extradition hearing has finished a day earlier than expected. The case being heard in London has been pushed back until the 18th of May, when it's scheduled to resume for another 3 weeks.
For more on this, we're joined by Kevin Gosztola, Managing Editor of Shadowproof in London. Where's the case at now, my friend?
Well, as you say, we're going to have this evidentiary hearing coming up in May and June, and this is going to be an opportunity for the defense and prosecution to call witnesses and put evidence on the record in order for the defense to challenge extradition, and also in order for the prosecutors to make the case that Julian Assange should be extradited to the United States.
What is the crux of the prosecution and the defence's arguments?
Well, essentially, the prosecution is rebutting the defense's case because the defense has the burden to show that Julian Assange should not be extradited to the United States. That's how I understand it in the past week. And so the prosecution is hoping that the judge agrees that the treaty, this United States-United Kingdom treaty, does not apply, and in fact that the United Kingdom's domestic law on extradition takes priority because it does not cover political offenses. And so to explain that, the defense is saying that Julian Assange is accused of a political offense because espionage is a political offense that throughout the world is recognized as such, similar to treason and sedition. This is usually something that's seen as like a crime against a state government. And there have been protections against extradition for people historically, and the prosecutors are hoping the judge seeks refuge in domestic law and ignores the treaty. The defense is arguing that this case is resting upon unfairness, that there's inaccuracies in the indictment, and that it's been brought in an improper manner, and that's their burden. They're going to try to convince the judge that there has been an abusive process in the way that this has been undertaken.
It's been an extraordinary story for a number of years now, of course, held up in the embassy, and so much to the Julian Assange story. How do you think he's being treated?
Well, we had a vivid example at the end of proceedings. He's been sitting in a glass box all week, isolated. There are complaints. We know very well that human rights organizations have complained about the way in which defendants are removed, and it goes to your fair trial rights as a defendant. Certainly, I'm an American. In the United States, defendants get to sit with their lawyers and participate in the process. The judge refused to allow him out of this glass box in the back of the courtroom, and I think that's going to be a character. That's going to be something we see have an effect on how things move forward in these proceedings, and it goes to the complaints that the defense has had about how he's being treated. They've complained about strip searches, the extent to which he's handcuffed. They've said that he is not being treated well when security guards are handling him. He's afraid he's being eavesdropped upon, that his communications with lawyers are not being protected, that his confidentiality is in jeopardy. And I think that's going to continue to have an effect on this extradition proceeding.
Along with his father describing the situation as Julian Assange being treated as psychological torture, as you mentioned. What's going to happen, Kevin, between now and May 18?
We have a case management hearing, but that's fairly standard. Well, I guess at this, there's going to be an important part where they go over witnesses and whether the prosecution is going to be bringing these witnesses that they want to call forward anonymously. Some of them may be appearing behind screens. There might be pseudonyms. We're dealing with classified information. We're dealing with sensitive individuals, and they might want to have some kind of anonymity when they testify.
There's a lot at stake here, there's little question, and from your perspective, having watched it and covered it, how significant is it a case from a press freedom perspective?
I believe it's extremely significant. Obviously, the United States has a lot of power throughout the world, a lot of influence, and this could set quite a precedent if Julian Assange is successfully brought to the U.S. and put on trial. I mean, first and foremost, he is not a U.S. citizen, and the United States is seeking to impose its own secrecy law on someone who is an Australian. And I think that's a big question, and something that people have to ask is how they feel about this case going forward and what it might mean for other countries who may think they have the permission to pursue cases similar to this against people who are involved in journalism, and to bring them to trial because they published classified information that embarrassed or revealed misconduct or alleged crimes committed by the governments.
This is extremely divided, isn't it, Kevin? We've seen on screen just so many protests that have been taken place, not only this week with the first leg of the extradition hearing, but for years. Just explain to us what it's like where you are, when you've been covering it.
Yeah, the thing that people should know is this courthouse has never handled a case of this magnitude. This past week was something of a learning as they went through the motions. And there were somewhere on the order of 60 to 70 plus journalists there that they had to accommodate. They have to deal with dozens of people from the public, many of them Assange supporters who want to be there. They had to accommodate people who are MPs from, let's say, Germany. There are people from Europe that wanted to come and observe. Human rights organizations sent observers, and they had to find a place for all of these people to fit at this courthouse. And I just don't think that they've never gone through anything like this with someone who is obviously seen as this international celebrity.
Yeah, international celebrity is it. And you mentioned supporters. Just finally, Kevin, some people have devoted their whole lives to Julian Assange. He has a lot of support, and very passionate support.
That's true. And in fact, we could hear it. All of us journalists in the courtroom, as well as the annex, where the overflow room where they had journalists, you could hear the chanting throughout the proceedings. And they're very devoted. They come from throughout Europe, but also they come from the US. They come from all parts of the globe to be there to support Julian Assange. And even when court was in session, they continued to chant, free Julian Assange. And they do have a lot of passion and dedication to seeing this man be set free and to not have him be extradited to the United States.
Kevin Gosztola, really appreciate your time and expertise this morning here on Weekend Edition, and hopefully we can touch base with you again.
Thank you.